Bud Clark is back. The TCU defense gets an unexpected boost for 2025.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. Thanks for tuning into the show. I've been covering TCU athletics for the past 12 seasons, and it's Monday. It's another week. Bud Clark is coming back to play football again for TCU football. He announced this on Saturday afternoon, just a very simple Twitter post in the same mold of Michael Jordan back in the day. It just simply said, "I'm back." It had, it was a cool graphic, but the message was, "I'm coming back for another season." There were some rumors about this, and I think the first time that I was curious about it or started to think about it being a possibility was I remember Andy Avalos, TCU defensive coordinator, having a media session before the bowl game, and he was discussing, aside from like preparing for Louisiana and trying to win the ball game, what were their main goals, or what were they trying to do with all this extra practice time. And he talked about how, yes, they're trying to develop young guys. That's part of it. But more specifically, for each individual player, they're really trying to set up a plan for what it looks like for next year. They're like, hey, what do we need to improve? Like, what do you individually need to improve on? How are you going to help the team the most? Let's, in practice, over these next few weeks, focus in on that so you can springboard into the offseason with that in mind and knowing these are the expectations that we have for you. And one of the guys he mentioned was Bud Clark. And he said, yeah, Bud, when he comes back next year, this is what we have in mind. So I was like, that's intriguing. And he made it official over the weekend that he's going to come back and play football. As far as what it means for TCU, I mean, you're getting a starter at safety that I think a month ago you didn't think would be part of the rotation. He's got all kinds of experience. He had 3 interceptions this year, 44 tackles, a forced fumble, and 3 pass breakups. And he just looked a lot more like himself this season. 2 years ago, I think, in year 2 of Joe Gillespie's scheme, for whatever reason, it wasn't working for Bud. And it felt like he would get lost a lot. There were high expectations for him. He wasn't playing like a guy who had been around for a long time and understood what the expectation was, which was really bizarre because he was so good in that first season under Joe. He had 5 picks, including one of the biggest plays in TCU history, the pick 6 to kick off the scoring in the college football playoff game against Michigan, against J.J. McCarthy. And that was such a huge moment of like, okay, we're here. We're not just going to get rolled over. Like, we're fighting. We have a plan. We have the ability to go in this ball game. And Bud did that. He has great instincts, and he's always been a guy that takes risk. A couple of seasons ago, the risk started to outweigh the reward. I also feel like he was asked to do a lot of things in the run game that he simply wasn't really built for in some ways. But finding the football, turning people over, making plays, that's what Bud Clark does well. And he's going to get to do it again next season for TCU football. He had 3 interceptions total, but 2 of them I remember because they were both big plays in the individual games. Against Utah, I mean, it was a 4th down play. So in hindsight, he could have knocked the ball down and saved TCU's field position. But Isaac Wilson is looking around on a 4th and 1 downfield for his tight end. He eventually just kind of heaves it up. Bud makes a play on it, gets up, makes a pick. And then against Arizona in the first drive of that ball game, and that Arizona team has struggled, but Noah Fafita, great quarterback, McMillan, outstanding wide receiver. There was some concern about could that Arizona offense make some things happen against this TCU defense and turn it into a track meet shootout where you're getting up and down the field each and every possession. And Bud had a pick on that first drive that TCU scored on. They go down and score a touchdown after that interception. But it sort of allowed the team and that stadium kind of exhale, like, okay, hey, we're good. Bud's here. He's making plays. The defense is ready to go. He adds toughness character. He's a great locker room presence. Watching like the Carter Boys documentaries over the past 2 years and just hearing how his teammates talk about him, it feels like he's one of those guys that everybody loves being around. He's got a great attitude. Coach Avalos has talked before about it. He's always got a smile on his face. He's always positive, always brings a ton of energy to practice and to games. So this team, I talked about this on Friday, they are banking on consistency. They have a lot of returning production, a lot of returning players. They are betting on the fact that they can build on the way they close the year, and everybody's going to understand their assignment. They're going to improve in the offseason. They're going to be a better team because of it. I also feel like they're betting on the culture that they created this past year. Sonny talked a lot in his first season about how that was a team that was – they had a lot of leadership on the team itself. The players led the charge. They held each other accountable. And that made the coaching staff's job really easy because they were able to sit back and allow those guys to kind of police themselves. In year two, it didn't feel like that was the case. This past season, though, this team bought in and they stayed bought in. I'm not saying the criticism was unfair with those early season losses. They were more than fair. I had questions about the team. I had questions about Sonny and his future and the program and where it was headed. But that locker room never seemed to question themselves. They believed, which is what they're supposed to do. But I think it's still meaningful given the circumstances that were at play and everything that was going on. You lose to Houston, you're 3-3, you're going into bye week. The season could have unraveled really quickly. But they stayed the course. They improved some things. They changed some things. They got better as the year went on. And Bud Clark was a huge part of that because he was one of those veteran guys on the team that didn't pout, didn't start pointing fingers. He just kept playing, kept being effective, and eventually it paid off. This safety group now, Bud Clark, Jamel Johnson, who hit the portal briefly this offseason but came back. Potentially Austin Jordan, the transfer from Texas, who played some corner, some safety this year, but I think eventually he's going to settle into that safety spot. Abe Kamara, I believe, is moving on. I don't think Abe has any more eligibility left, even with the rule about JUCO players getting 4 years after JUCO ball to play. That ruling recently came down because Diego Pevia, the quarterback at Vandy, challenged it. And then a few young guys who didn't see the field much this past year, but Jordan Lester at Mesquite, redshirt freshman, Devondre McGee, who played in the Houston area, and they recruited him a few years back. Somebody could emerge there. The bottom line is, especially at the safety spot, but I really think the entire secondary, because when you look at corners too, Avery Helm coming off an injury, but was super effective when he was healthy over the past few years. On the other side of him, sort of up for grabs right now, but Javon McIvor started to come on at the end of the year. Brennan Glover's coming off an injury himself. Channing Canada's played well. There's a ton of experience at safety and at corner. And I don't think it's crazy to say Sonny Dykes is an offensive coach. I feel like eventually the offense will be the unit that leads this team. But at the beginning of the year, we might be talking about a football team where the defense is ahead of the offense. And at least for those first couple of weeks, they sort of have to be the stabilizing force that you can lean on while the offense finds their sea legs with a new receiving core, with some shuffling happening on the offensive line. Josh Hoover's back. That's great. You got some running backs back that played a lot this past year. But there's going to be some mixing and matching and just timing, all those issues that you would expect early in the season magnified because of some of the personnel changes. But defensively, I mean, you're running back pretty much the same unit. You're shaking up some things at corner. You'll shake up some things at linebacker. And ultimately, I think there has to be more depth at defensive tackle and at corner this year, and that's going to be a huge determining factor in how good this defense is. But this is a huge step, getting Bud Clark back. He creates turnovers. He makes plays. He knows how to play college football. He's been doing it for a long time. He has a great understanding of the San Diablo system now, and this safety group went from being a place where it looked like you might have a lot of turnover to now there's not that much. However, when we come back, Bud Clark will be playing for a new position coach. I'll explain next on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Well, it's that time of the year, everybody. You're getting your W-2s in, all those tax forms. It's happening. Now, taxes is tax. It's tech. This is a message from Intuit TurboTax. Taxes were dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and even worrying if you're going to get any money back. Now, Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched your unique tax situation, an expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy, and you'll get the most money back guaranteed. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. This is Taxes, Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available at TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Paul Gonzalez, he has been at TCU for 12 seasons, 7 seasons as a safeties coach. He survived 2 separate coaching changes in some ways. He was on Gary Patterson's staff, was a corners coach, was a safeties coach. Gary gets let go, and he was one of those guys that Sonny Dykes retained. Even with Joe Gillespie coming on as defensive coordinator, Paul Gonzalez was still the safeties coach. Joe Gillespie leaves. They hire Andy Avalos. He's still on staff. They kept him around. Carlton Buckles, the corners coach, left right before the season started last year because of what was deemed just some personal issues. But Paul Gonzalez is not stepping away from coaching. He is going to another school. He's actually going down the road to Waco to coach with Dave Aranda and Baylor. Dave Aranda naming him as the corners coach and also the passing game coordinator for this upcoming season. I mean, logically, I get it. Dave is a defensive coach. He's a well-respected mind in college football circles, especially on that side of the ball. I will say, one weird thing about it to me, Dave Aranda, known as a very great defensive mind, was the DC at LSU when they won the national title with Edo as head coach and had all those NFL players. But this will be going on year 3 or 4 where Dave Aranda is trying to figure out his defense. He fired his mentor, Ron Roberts, a few years ago. He brings in Matt Powledge as defensive coordinator. That didn't work. This past year, he said, all right, well, I'll be the dude. I'll be the guy that calls plays, and I'm going to give that responsibility back to myself. That didn't work. They were bad on defense last year. So they fired their corners coach, and Paul Gonzalez shifting spots over from safety to corner, which he's coached that before. I think the biggest thing here is he's given this passing game title coordinator job, which I feel like that comes with a pay raise, but it also comes with some prestige and some ability to, put that on the resume and work your way up in coaching circles. Dave Aranda really has a thing for Gary Patterson's staff, like his old staff. He hired Gary himself, and I'm sure GP was in his ear about this one, telling him great things about Paul. But he hired Jared Anderson last year. Now he's bringing in Paul Gonzalez. This is a loss for TCU. Now, my first reaction when I heard the news, I wonder how tough it is to work for Andy Avalos, just in general. But also, now a couple of these guys that were holdovers. Carlton Buckles was hired originally by Sonny when he took the job here. But he moves on. And now your safeties coach moves on. I did think it was weird at the time. I was in agreement with it. I was okay with it. I understood what Sonny was doing. Joe Gillespie got let go. They parted ways with him kind of late in the process. And they wanted to keep some continuity. They wanted to keep, all their players on board, all those things. So, I assume Sonny kind of called his shot. And he was like, look, you can have this job. It's a good job, high-profile job. But I'm going to have some input in the assistants that you bring on, the position coaches that you bring on. And I did think that was kind of bizarre, given that Sonny's background is as an offensive coach. So it's like you're letting a guy come in here and you're saying, hey, I want you to run the show on this side of the ball because that's not my bag. But by the way, here's who you need to keep on staff. That being said, I thought Paul did a good job, and he's been a great coach through his career. He coached Trayvon Merrick, who was an All-American, Thorpe Award winner. He's coached Bud Clark. He's coached Miller Bradford, Ardarius Washington. The list goes on of guys that he has developed, put in the NFL, made players to the next level. Safeties at TCU, as long as Paul Gonzalez has been coaching them, they have been physical. They've been ball hawks. They've made big-time plays. So it's a big loss. Paul Gonzalez also well-respected on the recruiting trail and was just, a stalwart of this coaching staff for a long time. He was a dude that you counted on. He was going to be there. He understood TCU. He understood what it takes to win here, all those things. Now, where do they go next? Who do they hire? I've heard Sam Carter's name thrown around, former TCU safety who is now in the coaching game. But, I would be surprised. Not because I don't think Sam can do the job. He's currently at Purdue, where he's a corners coach. I think he'd do a great job. But Andy Avalos doesn't have ties to Sam. And to me, this feels like this is the opportunity where you give Andy Avalos the reins and you say, okay, go get your guy. We're giving you the chance to go get someone who fits what you want to do, who understands what you're about, and can get the job done. So here you go. Here's the keys. Go make the selection you need to, and we'll back you up. And so I think it's going to be somebody who knows Andy well, has probably worked with him in the past, and we'll keep an eye on who those candidates would be. But end of an era, man. It's weird. Gary leaving was truly transformational, obviously. But for the past 3 years, there's been little pockets of the coaching staff where his influence is still felt. Doug Meacham, he's now moving on. Paul Gonzalez makes the jump some elsewhere. They're not going to hire an inside wide receivers coach. They're moving Mitch Critch to tight end, and they're just going to let Malcolm Kelly coach all the receivers now. But, fascinating change. And I remember Dave Aranda, because TCU played Baylor the week after GP was let go. And, of course, they famously won that game. Chandler Morris had like an out-of-body experience out there and played at a high level. But I do remember Dave, talking about that week. He was talking about Gary, talking about his legacy and just how much he loved him and appreciated him and admired him from afar. Was always really curious about what he thought about things, his knowledge. Had like VHS tapes and DVDs of some of his presentations at coaching school in the past. And he hired him as an advisor, assistant, and now he's still using his influence on that Baylor staff by getting some of his former guys. And Paul Gonzalez becomes the latest coach to make that jump. So Bud Clark, Jamel Johnson, Jordan Lester, Austin Jordan, all these Veteran safeties, we're going to need that veteran presence and expertise because the longtime coach is going elsewhere. And I like Paul. He seemed like a great dude. I hate that he's ended up at Baylor, but that's college football in 2025 for you. When we come back, a recap of basketball over the weekend, men and women, both winners. We'll talk about the next round. Locked on Horned Frogs, your team every day. Gametime app, download it today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. They show you a picture of what your view is going to be from your seat when you sit down. There's no hidden fees. There's fees, but they tell you what you are up front. Download the Gametime app. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions do apply. Gametime. Give it a try today. TCU men's and women's basketball. Both winners over the weekend. Men won on Saturday afternoon at home against BYU, 71-67. Noah Reynolds, clutch once again. Had a big-time layup at the end of that game. With about 12 seconds left to give the Frogs the lead. TCU got to stop. Micah Robinson, true freshman, hit some massive free throws to give the Frogs a 2-possession lead and basically ice that game away. Reynolds, over 33 minutes, though, 8 of 18 from the field, 21 points, 3 of 6 from 3. Somebody said this after the game. They were like, we never got to see Frankie and Noah, because Noah was dealing with a sprained wrist early in the year, and that held him back somewhat. They're like, we never got to see Noah and Frankie Collins, who went down with a foot injury, fully healthy this year. What could they have been if they were fully healthy? But I also wonder if that injury to Frankie has allowed Noah Reynolds to really assert himself as a real deal scorer and just change the dynamic for this team and change the way that he approaches the season. Because he looks like he is just under control right now. I mean, he gets to the rim. He can shoot threes. He can do it all from an offensive standpoint. Also plays, solid defense. Frogs forced 16 turnovers. They only turned the ball over 6 times. They took care of the basketball. BYU shot the ball well, but BYU scores over 80 points a game, or they did come in this ball game. So I think overall you're pretty happy with holding them to 67 points, even though they did make a lot of threes and made life tough on you at times. They find a way to survive at home, though. And I think, the key in this year as they sort of rebuild and reset is you got to steal these home games and win them and stack up as many of them as you can in that win column and hope that it leads you to a postseason berth. Micah Robinson and David Punch, the true freshmen, they played a lot. Robinson was 16 minutes, 10 points, had those 2 crucial free throws, got to the line 5 times. I think you need to see more of him, man. I mean, he's physical. He's good. He can shoot. He can get downhill and get to the rim. He does a lot of things well for this team when he's in the ball game. Punch had another productive night, 7 points on 2 of 6 shooting. Pretty balanced scoring effort. But the story of the game to me, other than, playing really well on defense as a team, Noah Reynolds just continues to be the dude. In a pretty surprising turn of events midseason, he's gone from, okay, maybe he wasn't everything we thought he would be coming out of Green Bay as a transfer, to he's clearly the best player on the team right now, and he's playing at a really high level. The women, they took down Texas Tech, and the game wasn't particularly close. They win 69-43. Sedona Prince had another big night. Haley Van Lith did her thing, continues to impress. Madison Connor shot the ball well from 3. And it was a close game in the first half, but really, I mean, once they pulled away in the second half of that ball game, they did a good job of keeping Tech at arm's length and just doing what they had to do, figuring it out, winning the game again. They play UCF next at home on Tuesday, and they get Utah on Friday. Utah is ranked number 22 in the country. The men also play Utah this week. They play Utah on Saturday, and they'll go down to Waco to play – they play Utah on Wednesday, and they'll go down to Waco to play Baylor on Sunday. So both teams – the women are going to be in the postseason. They're going to be an NCAA tournament team. The men, trying to find a way to get as many wins as possible to make their case. I know you might be, hey, we're only 4 games into conference play. Why were you talking about that? Well, that's just where we're at. We'll be back tomorrow. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast.